Hello, hello. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your lunch to spend a little bit of time talking about ROI and budgets and all that kind of cool stuff. I'm really happy that you registered, and I'm glad that you are going to share this experience with us. So, we want to talk about what should be included in a budget when you are calculating the ROI for your experiential programs. And I think it's important first to review briefly, maybe 10, 15 minutes, about how do you calculate ROI to begin with, because you got to have a sense of what you're trying to do so that budget has context. So what we'll do is we'll go through the ROI model very quickly. When it gets to the point where we're putting in the budget for that ROI model, I'll shift over to a spreadsheet and I'll show you how the categories lay out and what we recommend and what we do to include those categories in budgets for ROI. There'll be an opportunity for you to download all the definitions and everything that we've said. If you go to portma.net/budget at any point, you'll be able to access all the points in the budget and the things to download. There's also an opportunity to get the spreadsheet I'll show you as well, if that's something that is you're interested in. So let's go right in and talk about the budget, or talk about the ROI as a methodology real quick, and how you're calculating ROI to begin with. And I think it's important to start by saying that there are so many things you can measure in experiential that you've got to ground it with something. And we ground it in three basic questions. And we find that these questions really appeal to different kinds of stakeholders. The first question is, how often do we reach the right consumer? And this appeals really well to stakeholders that care about impressions. They think about marketing in the context of gross rating points. They think about different media buys by channel. Those things are all a part of the general psyche of how they think about marketing. And so you want to be able to give them that same data. You want to be able to tell them, hey, when I'm going to these kinds of venues, I'm reaching these kinds of people. And that aligns with how they're used to buying media by channel. And it answers that fundamental question, not only from a quantity perspective, but from a quality perspective as well. Now, you also have stakeholders that care only about sales. And sometimes sales is what you're focused on. Other times, you're going to get your ROI from really adding them or moving them through the purchase cycle and creating some kind of intent where it didn't previously exist. So we frame that question as, when is the campaign creating intent where it didn't previously exist? And you'll see when I lay this out in the model, that is a great indicator of actual sales behavior. So, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, what's great is that the reach and the impact come together to give us the foundation for an ROI calculation. That's what we'll share. And when we're talking about ROI, we're talking about those stakeholders that really care about the larger decisions. They care about, should I have done one national campaign or should I have done more regional campaigns? Or they're going to be caring about decisions that are like, I could have put this money into digital, but I put a lot into experiential. Was that the right place to put it? And ROI gives us the ability as experiential marketers to have the same contribution to the conversation and understanding the marketing mix for the brand as any other channel. So reach, impact, and value. Together, we call those the RIV paradigm. And when you're thinking about how that applies and how these questions apply, you can really narrow it down to maybe one event day. You can look at one potential event day and see how this all lays out. Let's say on an event day, you're doing some kind of street intercept work and you have 90 engagements over that day. And your that 90 engagements is the number that you're probably reporting anyways. It's the volume metric, it's the quantity metric of your reach. But there are also the components to it, whether or not you're on target. Are you reaching the kind of consumer that was your intention to reach? If you chose this place for street intercepts, did you do that because you expect, for one reason or another, for this location or these types of locations to over-index for parents, for example? And you want to understand whether or not you are accurate with that, because somebody who represents your target consumer is going to be somebody who internalizes the messaging that you're looking to deliver. So if that was 90%, let's say that 90% of the people we were trying to reach, or we were choosing that venue location or that location for the street intercepts were the actual people we got to, then we know that that's the quality metric of our reach. I said parental status. It's oftentimes a product of gender. It could be an age organized into generation. But either way, we know from this day of activity that 81 people left the event internalizing the unique value proposition or unique sales proposition of that brand messaging. And that 81 now are the people that we would start to work with and think are the ones that I would expect at some point, hopefully, to become customers, although we're not there yet in the model, because that 81 just gives us the count of the appropriate people, the people that may have the need or represent the target audience or the category market that we're trying to reach. If we're going to understand those 81 and how many turned into customers, we need to first understand how many are current customers, because we don't know if those current customers would have bought otherwise. And therefore, we need to get a measure of that and exclude them. The way we do that is looking at where the individual is in the purchase cycle. We know that people are either need awareness, trial, or purchase. They need to have the problem the brand solves. They need to be aware that the brand is a legitimate solution. They need to overcome any barriers to trying that solution. And then if the experience that they had in trying the solution aligned up with the promise that marketing made, then they're going to be customers. They're going to purchase. And so when we have a measure of this, we're able to look at everybody who's not a customer and identify them as the percent that were non-customers, or everybody who's not a customer, identify them as the percent that were non-customers. Because at the end of the day, if you are talking to non-customers, it's an acquisition program. And when you're talking to customers, it's a loyalty program. And if your product doesn't increase sales through incremental usage, then you've got to exclude customers from the mix. Now, let's say, for example, that we did that and we found that our non-customer rate was right in the neighborhood of 81%, for example. And so now we know that of those 90 initial engagements, 81 represent the target consumer. If 81% were non-customers, we now have 66 people that are leaving the event with at least an opportunity to generate incremental revenue for the brand. That's how we get to the didn't previously exist part. But we need to understand the intent part. And so that same profiling around need, awareness, trial, and purchase can also help us understand, why did our experiential work? How did we move them through that purchase cycle? I mean, the reason why 100% of your target consumer is not buying the product right now is because they're stuck somewhere in that purchase cycle. And any kind of marketing, the only goal of any kind of marketing is to unstick them. Now, we know that earlier stage folks, people that are potential customers that are in early stage of the purchase cycle, they're going to need to be educated about the problem that the brand solves, and they're going to need to be aware and identify with that brand as being a potential solution. And so education on problem identification, lifestyle match, those large sponsorships that are generating brand awareness, those are the kind of things that are going to move people forward in the purchase cycle when they're at these earlier stages. And the way we can measure that is through changes in attitude, or like recommend intent or advocacy. Those are the kind of things that will help us understand where we're moving people. It's not, when it comes to ROI, though, we have to get a purchase intent measure. We have to get a behavioral change measure in order to turn that into some kind of dollar amount. When they're in the latter stages, when they're in trial or they're current customers and we're looking for this ongoing repeat purchase, then we are much more focused on their behaviors. It could be that you removed a barrier in the marketing with a coupon. It could be that you created this simple ability to test drive the vehicle, or maybe you provided them with a sample so they could taste it without having to go to the store, find it, and spend their own money. But those barrier removal items are what really move people forward. And when we do that, we're measuring that with what they're actually going to do next time. So are you going to buy this brand of whiskey the next time you're shopping for whiskey at a retail location? Or the next time you're in the market for a birthday cake mix, are you going to purchase this kind of birthday cake? Those kind of understanding of intent can help us model what their actual outcome is going to be, what their actual behavior will be. So we have that, and we can apply that intent figure back across our model, and that gives us the ability to see that those 90 people that we originally talked to, if we run that through and 78% say they'll actually buy, then we know 51 people are leaving the event who probably weren't going to buy otherwise, who are now saying they're going to buy in the future. there's a big yeah but in all of that, because people don't always do what they say they're going to do. They actually oftentimes don't do what they say they're going to do. And we have to account for that. We have to address the percent of fallout between those 51 people that said they were going to buy versus the ones that actually purchased. And there are methods for that are well established in the industry. There's a model that we're a big fan of called basis modeling. And it basically looks at when we have the number of people that answered an intent question and the percent of those people, and how that lines up with an actual multiplier based on really just millions of diary studies where people are saying what they're going to do in a survey, and then they're responding by telling us what they actually purchased later on down the road. We can look at those ratios based on how they answer an intent question and start to get a sense of what that actual purchase is. And when we run that through overall, we can get this weighted number, this weight that we can use to figure out how many of those 51 is it fair to estimate actually purchase. So doing that, now that we got that 44%, that allows us to start to translate the original 90 engagements into an actual number of new customers. So we've got this 90, it goes to 90%, we're on target. 66 were non-customers, 51 said they were going to buy. If 44% actually purchased, that we're left with 23 people that are now estimated new customers. And that's kind of fascinating when we get to that point, because we can divide that 23 by 90 and get a conversion measure. But more importantly, we can take that 23 and we can start to get a sense of what it looks like from a perspective of value. And that starts to get us into being able to answer that last question around return on investment. So if we had 23 customers, and let's say that the average annual value of a customer was $51, give or take, then we can do that math and we can get to the incremental revenue delivered. If you have any questions about how to calculate the annual value per customer, we've got resources on that, so just reach out. But that incremental revenue delivered is the multiplication of the value per customer times the number of new customers. And then we've got the activation cost, and we have to divide by the cost or our budget in order to get to any return on investment. And so let me jump into the spreadsheet real quick and show you how we recommend, now that we have this context, that you calculate your budget, or what you include in your budget when doing this kind of work. So what you see here is our budgeting spreadsheet that we use when we're doing this internally for clients. This is something that's certainly available to you if you go to that portmod.net/budget. You'll be able to get access to all these definitions that you see down here, which are all the items that are included in our recommended budgeting. But it also there's access to the spreadsheet itself if you find that useful. So let's go through this and fill this out real quick and talk about the items as we do it. So management fee, let's say that's going to end up being a little more than 10% of your overall cost. So that would put us at $18,500. It's sometimes questioned whether management fees should be included in the budget. And I would always argue that it's an absolute yes, because you're looking to calculate or use a budget figure that if the client or the brand team had not done the experiential, it wouldn't have otherwise been an expense to them. And so underneath that general logic and that thinking, we want to make sure we're including that management fee. And so let's say this is a street intercept campaign. Let's say it's running 12 weeks and they're going to go 5 days a week for 12 weeks. And they're going to have 2 staff doing, we'll say, a combination of wet and dry sampling. So those brand ambassadors, they're going to run about 720 hours all in at $20 and $28 an hour. We're looking at about $20,160 in costs for them. You've got a field manager who's monitoring that and making sure everything is flowing back at the office, or maybe they're in the field themselves. So we've got to include money for them. And then you've got your training materials. You've got the work done to maybe fly them to a location and get them trained up on the brand. So we want to include that as well. Travel overall for the entire program, let's say that is going to be around $12,000. That is any expenses related to getting a person from point A to point B. We've also got the overnight stays. We want to make sure we're including hotels. Let's say it's around $10,000, a little bit more. There's a per diem for everybody, so they've got to be able to eat and handle their living and miscellaneous expenses for each day that they're activating, and so let's put that at around $6,000. And then there's premiums or collateral that you're distributing. And premiums or collateral, really anything that has an intrinsic value to it. It might be the keychain that you've got the brand logo on, or it could be a flyer that you're passing out. And so the costs of producing those, warehousing them, getting them to locations, shipping them, those all go into your premium and your collateral costs. Now, venue fees certainly need to be included. In my example here, I'll leave it at 0 because we are talking about a street intercept, and it may be a street intercept that's lean and mean, and you're organizing it in such a way that you don't have venue fees. But if you were paying $10,000 for that state fair activation or the like, you want to make sure that's included as a full sum here as well. Now, samples can be a significant cost, and there are many cases, and most of the time samples are included in a budget. Because of that logic that it's the money that the client didn't have to spend if they didn't do the marketing. But I do see examples where samples are included because maybe that has been earmarked by the client under a different budget, and you're utilizing those samples for the purposes of this activation. In those cases, you might just include the cost of warehousing or shipping those samples. But in most cases, we're going to recommend you get those all-in costs in there, and so therefore, we're going to put in the samples. And samples can be expensive. Let's say here that we're going to spend about $37,500 on samples themselves. When thinking about whether or not to include samples, I would often argue that it is smart to come to the table with your ROI model that is, if anything, seen too conservative. You want to include all the costs that you believe should be in there so that when the client is looking at the way you did it, they could say, worst case scenario, they're saying, hey, that 37 for samples, we can take that out. So you want to be able to have a conservative model as opposed to the other side where you're seen as trying to cook the books a little bit. That's never going to be a win for you. So we're going to include samples here at 37,000. We've got 12,000 for event reporting and your systems, and your data collection is for your team that's doing that work for you. And then other event elements, maybe there's some miscellaneous stuff in there, but those other items that you're organizing or getting for the activation, you get that in there as well. Now, we had talked about this being 12 weeks, 5 days a week, so that gives us about 60 days. And we get an initial value of cost per day, which is for the model there. But we've also got to take into account vehicle costs or any booths costs. And you can often treat these a little bit differently because if that vehicle, let's say you're purchasing a vehicle for $32,000, right? And or maybe you're not purchasing, you're leasing it. But that vehicle, all 32,000 of that doesn't have to be recognized for this individual program, especially if you've got the ability to utilize it over a 5-year lease, for example. If the salvage value of that lease was $2,000, and you're looking at really the cost contribution of a vehicle for this first year is really just $6,000, not the full $32,000. Now, if you were looking to amortize this over a shorter period of time, you'd have to make that adjustment, and of course your overall cost would go up. But let's say it's 5 at this point. And there's also the booth itself. It's those hard assets that you are purchasing for the program, but you think you're going to get more out of it than just this one-off kind of piece. Sometimes you're buying stuff that you don't plan to use more than once. Other times you're buying something that with a certain level of ruggedness that you expect to be able to use it over multiple programs for the same campaign. So let's say you're spending $8,500 on this streamlined booth, and that it has a salvage value, it have a parts value when it's used up its useful life of around $1,000. And if you think you can get 3 years out of it, then you're not contributing the whole $8,500. You're contributing just $2,500. And so now we've got a total budget of $161,000. We've got over 60 days, we've got a daily budget of $2,686. And that's the number that we can then include back into the ROI model down here I've got 64 for the day, but it was 2,000 something there. And when you divide that out, you get this overall return on investment. Now, it's a lot of hard work to get to this one number. And what everybody realizes when they get to that number is that it doesn't really matter. I mean, other than it being positive, you can't do a lot with ROI as a single number. But if you were doing this across all of your campaign activations, if you were doing this for everything, and you looked over at 100 event days, for example, then it becomes very linear, and you can start to look at what the return on investment is overall across all of that. And while the ROI, because it's linear, will be the same, you can start to segment it among the things that contributed to that. And when you can segment your ROI, then you've got enormous amounts of value and enormous amounts of intelligence that you can use to create better campaigns in the future. So let's say by venue type, I had talked about being street intercepts. Let's say you actually, across those hypothetical 100 event days, you had festivals, you had retail, and you had community events. Well, because we can look at the variation of how ROI differed. And what we can do is deconstruct that to understand why were festivals outperforming community events in this sense. And you can, because of the way you organize the model, you can ask yourself, was it because I wasn't reaching enough people? Was it because it was the wrong kind of people? Was I not having the desired impact? Or did I spend too much money to do that? And all four of those go into what you use to design the program in the first place. And so you have control over those things, and therefore you have control over how you're delivering value to the client. We see a lot of variation by market, because in different markets, people have different levels of competitive activity going on. You have different levels of historical marketing spend in that market. And so we're going to see that variation, and that becomes an important lever when trying to design a program that's going to be in line with what the client wants to create. And then even the kind of people that you reached. While you may be under target in some scenarios, you can also look at, let me validate those targets, and let me also look to see how that varies. And you're going to see a lot of variation. There are a number of different things that you can slice and dice ROI by, but what really matters is that you're focused on the things that you have control over. So that's what we want to share. We want to share with you like the overall idea around ROI and experiential marketing, and we also wanted to make sure that you understood how we think about budgets and how we include budgets when designing ROI models for agencies and for brands. So you can go to that web page. Let me show you real quick what you'll see when you go there. If you go to portma.net, net./budget, you'll be brought to the download page for that. And so you just submit your email address, and you'll get that full framework. And then once you're looking at that framework, these definitions that we talked about, you'll have an opportunity to reach out to us if you want that spreadsheet. There's no cost for the spreadsheet. We'd be happy to talk to you. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to spend your lunch with us. Looks like we're coming right up on 23 minutes. We're trying to keep it under a half an hour. Really appreciate that you're doing. Doug, thank you so much for chiming in the chat. You have a great day, and we're going to do this again next month, talking about a different area of ROI modeling, and I hope you'll be able to join us then as well. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.